Hello and welcome to another episode of the Burn Your Boats podcast. Today is a special guest, Nathan Brooks. I've known Nathan for 10 years, and there's probably one word I'd use to describe Nathan. He's a polymath. He's somebody who has high levels of success and high levels of skill in a whole multitude of different areas. And so there's other word I'd use about Nathan: experienced, sincere, authentic. We're going about to spend the next hour with the real deal. Somebody who has been in the real estate business his whole life and has had multiple iterations and careers within that. And so, Clark, just to whet our appetites, can you tell me just a little bit about Nathan Brooks, who we're about to interview?
You're going to love this episode. And I think that the exciting thing about it is that he has so much experience, David. So, I mean, Nathan has been in the real estate game for a ton of time. And I feel like he's had a hand in so many different pieces of the real estate industry. I mean, he started off as a musician. So who would have thought? He graduated with a degree and was a musician for like the first 10 years, which is, I'm sure, gave him a lot of experience that he actually gravitates from in the public speaking field, which is why he's such a great public speaker. I've seen him speak a few different times, but he's been an author. He has a great book. He's a lender. He has a huge social media presence. He runs one of the top masterminds in the country. He's a land developer. He's been a turnkey provider of rental properties. He's a financial coach. I mean, the list goes on, and we'll kind of dive into that more. And the thing that's great, you as the listener, do us a favor if you find this content to be really good, because we only want to bring you like top tier guests, right, that are going to be able to give you takeaways that you can take away from this episode. Go share it with someone. If there's something that strikes with you, or maybe you've got a friend or a family member that's on the fence and they just maybe they're making excuses or something, go hit the share button and send this episode to them, because I think it's going to get a lot of people off their behinds to be able to start taking some real action. And I know, David, you've got a lot of great experience with Nathan, and he really shines through in this episode. So, David, take this away and we'll get to the episode.
Yeah, absolutely echo what Clark has just said. If you've ever listened to an episode of our podcast, you went, wow, that was really good. Could you share it with one person? That would be do us a huge favor. We're trying to grow it. And the more we grow it, the better the guests that we get, and the more value we can give to the guests as well.
Right.
Outside that, if you want to know the big takeaway in this podcast, it's such a good one. It's worth waiting around for. And without further ado, let's get right into Nathan Brooks.
Let's do it.
Welcome to the Burn Your Boats podcast. From music to real estate millionaire. Special guest Nathan Brooks, serial entrepreneur. And now, your hosts, Clark Lunt and David Shaw.
Oh, Nathan Brooks, welcome to our Burn Your Boats podcast. Nathan, I know that you're a little bit jet lagged over there. You're just in from Italy. Tell me your news. Where have you been for the last week? What have you been doing?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on this podcast, and I love you both dearly. And of all the things coming back from Italy, I want to do is hang out with, awesome friends and talk about real estate and all the other things that make life interesting, and our ability to travel like that. So happy to be here, and just so fortunate. We spent 8 arduous days going through the most beautiful parts of, in and around the wine country of Barolo, and otherwise drinking wine 2 or 3 times a day. It was tough.
Somebody's got to do it.
Somebody's got to do it. And
for those of you who don't know, Barolo is possibly regarded as the number one wine jurisdiction on earth, really, and that's where the number one wines on the planet come from. So, Nathan, welcome back to the land of the living.
Yeah, on the airplane, they handed us some wine, and I was like, "What
Oh.
vintage of Barolo is that?"
Yeah. Get away with your vinegar, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Well,
actually, that's a lie. I said they were like, "Would you like some wine?" I'm like, "Yeah."
Nathan, you're gonna feel weird when you wake up tomorrow morning being back in the States and there's no wine in your Cheerios, and it's gonna be like your body's gonna go into shock. So
True.
we'll see how it goes.
It's funny that one of the things they talked about was, back in the day, they're like, well, this Dolcetto, my grandparents would have, this was a breakfast wine. And I'm like, breakfast wine, breakfast wine. Kind of, nudge Stacy, my wife, and like, well, we need a breakfast wine.
I can tell you I do not need a breakfast wine anymore. We're doing fine in the evening wines. Nathan, our podcast is called Burn Your Boats. Now you're just back from a long trip with your beautiful wife. And I know you to be a person who travels a lot and has created freedom in your life. And that is what Burn Your Boats might mean to us, right? But we believe, and the name of the podcast indicates it, that, the boats are always burning. Either you're preparing to create financial freedom and stuff for yourself, or somebody is going to take your spot. Nathan, what does the concept of burn your boats mean to you? When people say to you got to burn your boats, what does that mean to you?
Well, I can so easily visualize, being in the boats, traveling from somewhere, committed to some mission, getting on shore, looking at your men and being like, guess what? Grab the gasoline. We're doing this, and whatever this is. And so I think, when I hear burn the boats, I literally, think of being all in on something, and whatever that might be, you literally make a commitment to yourself. I was listening to a book this morning, and it was talking about a lot of the author was mentioning that a lot of times in marriage ceremonies now, they're not saying till death do us part. They're not burning their boats. They're leaving a full simple exit. And nothing in life, I think, is easy. And a lot of people want the exit. And I think the burn the boats means no. The exit is we
Right.
figure it out, not we quit.
I couldn't agree. What a great answer. What a
Yeah,
great
I love
answer.
it.
We agree completely with that. As if you're gonna do anything at all that's meaningful, if you want anything that's meaningful, it's gonna be hard. There's no
Mhm.
such thing as a free lunch.
No. And I think the other thing too, and the older I get, God, I can't believe I said that. Older I get, the more I realize, I used to think that being successful meant that things just worked. And now I realize it's just not true. It's actually,
Right.
what level of suffering are you willing to take? What level of persistence are you willing to commit? And over what period of time? And David, there's a conversation you and I had, and I talk about it all the time. We were sitting on a patio, having a glass of wine, eating sushi, if you remember. And you said to me, I've made most of my income from active activities, and I've made most of my wealth in my life from holding real estate. And, that takes time. You can't trade that anything else for it. There's nothing else.
You've really pipped me to the final question on the way out the door here today. We're going to talk about that exact concept, the concept of earning and wealth creation, and what, in hindsight, so many of us, as we get older, I'm 52. Nathan, what age are you for the audience?
43.
You're 43, right? As we get older, you've led quite the life for a 43-year-old, let me tell you. But what when we look back, and we see, with the benefit of hindsight, what worked, what didn't work, and that's going to be our final question out the door here today. But we've got a long way between now and getting to this final question.
Yeah.
Clark's got a doozy for you. So Clark, what do you take this away, because we're going to summarize what we understand to be a small glimpse of the public persona, let's say, of Nathan Brooks and the things that we know and we have involved ourselves in your career. So, Clark, why don't you let the listeners know just a little bit about Nathan here?
So we looked into, I was, looking into your background a little bit, Nathan, and I know a lot about you, and then there were some things that I kind of forgot. And I was like, well, who is Nathan Brooks? Like, what has he done, And so I looked and, I'm looking at LinkedIn and looking at different things. And it's like, okay, so this is what I found out to kind of have that diverse background, Nathan's. Let's see. So I literally have to read this verbatim because it's like 5 pages long, it seems like. But of course you're a musician, right? Because that's a nice segue to real estate. That's obvious, right? That's the traditional trajectory, right? Musician, a public speaker. I think you've been on about every podcast there is, period. You were a worship leader, an author, a lender, a big social media guy. You're a hunter. You run a mastermind, a world traveler. Obviously, as you got back from Italy, so that was a good segue. Turnkey provider, an investor, develop new construction, land flipper, financial coach, realtor. You backpack 50 miles just randomly because why not? So that's just, and I'm sure I'm missing like 10 other things, but did I catch the gist of that, Nathan?
Yes.
Most of it?
It sounds pretty ridiculous when you read it like that.
So I read it, I was like, God, that is so many. I don't know when this guy sleeps. And so, as David alluded to, our podcast is Burn Your Boats, right? So walk me through a little bit of the kind of like the evolution of the journey as to, how you went for these. Some of them are a lot different. They're not just like you went from a realtor to investor, like kind of like some of the traditional things. And kind of the second part. So walk us through that journey. And then the second kind of follow up to that is, you're pivoting a lot along the way. Do you have any regrets? Like if you're able to get in your time machine and go back and be like, maybe I pivoted too much, maybe I burned my boats too much, or is it something that you look back and you're like, that's what got me to where the success that I'm at right now? So kind of talk to the listener a little bit about, bring us through that journey and maybe a little bit of a hindsight looking backwards.
I loved music, and I remember trying to like conduct the choir from the church pew at age 3, 4, 5, and wanting to be on stage, wanting to be in the middle of the thick of it, so to speak. And I remember walking into the instrument or choir room or whatever it was in 5th grade and seeing the giant upright bass and like, dude, that's the one. Like I am playing that giant thing. And trying to get it home. And my parents, Ford Taurus, we'd have to literally load it in the back seat, and the scroll, the end piece that looks like circles would be sticking out of the end of that car, trying to get it home to practice. And
was it the wagon? Was it the wagon Taurus, or was it just the sedan?
No, just the sedan, baby. We just jammed that sucker in there.
Yeah.
And I remember just so many times just feeling like, gosh, I love music, and I love what it does and how it transforms people in time and space and culture and all these things. And so I devoted my from 5th grade through 10 years after college to music, and I played professionally, and I've played both till 3 a.m. in a bar, and I've performed in front of thousands of people. And so I played thousands and thousands of times. And I think that when I look back at it, to be comfortable on stage, or to be comfortable to speak to people, or to understand how to connect with them, like I spent so much time learning that, right? And guess what? It's in real time. There's no do-over. You don't get a second
Right.
play. If you're standing on stage and you're holding a guitar and singing a song, like, I have reset songs on stage before in church, but it's not fun. It's not fun. And so, I remember hearing the advertisements for Rich Dad Poor Dad education, and I was making my living teaching piano and bass and guitar, and working and slinging guitars at a guitar shop. And I'm like, man, this sounds awesome. I read the book. I went to the, couple first levels of their education and jumped into real estate. And I screwed up so many times, so many times. And I think, the journey was just like, oh, this sounds cool. I want to do it. And through my life, that's what I've done. And whether it was training jujitsu and getting in a cage fight or learning golf and I had a goal of shooting 100 in my first year, hire a coach, go do it. Like, it's not that hard to commit yourself if you're willing to do it. So I think when you ask the regret piece, it's just, really the only regret I have is when we flipped so many damn houses. I wish I would have kept a lot more of them. And so that's really the only regret that I have, was just not keeping more.
Everyone's number one regret, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, I've learned a lot of lessons, and all the scripts taught me so many things, whether it was leadership or management or having a low overhead or whatever these things are, what kind of business I want. And so I'm grateful. And I think regrets put us in the wrong place. So we put our energy in the past instead of in the present.
I like it.
Very recently, Nathan, we quoted a wise man has recently told us when the going's good, none of us are big enough. And when the going's bad, none of us are small enough.
Yeah.
Right. I just think that that's a very interesting concept, because each time you pivot, let's say, I'm just looking at here from author, right? You've written an amazing book, to a lender, right? To social media, to growing what is, I think, one of the most impressive masterminds in the United States. Big shout out to the Bridge Mastermind in Kansas City, which is your mastermind group. To a turnkey provider, to new home construction, to land development and entitling land, which we've done down in Texas, to a financial coach. I'm going to shout out right now, not so much to you, but to your amazing wife, who's actually facilitated that and allowed that to happen. Because as I look through all of that and I look at what is the friction that I've experienced in my life, it's getting the time to jump in it, with both feet. And I'm curious about where you feel you got the time. You do have an amazing wife, but you also, I think you've already said it twice, in that you're very, very quick to get coaching, invest in yourself, and put the knowledge around you. You're much faster at doing that than I am. I'll dig in as much as I can individually, and then I'll understand where I need to put the professional help. But you're very, very quick to just go, I want to know something, I'm going to get a coach and I'm going to learn it. Can you tell me how you managed to get the time to do all this? These just all of that pivoting. Can you tell me where you got the time for it?
Well, there's a lot of things in there from a pivot standpoint that have been great, but there's been a lot of pain in them too.
I love what you just said, by the way, about the pain, because it is difficult to make change. Mm-hmm. That is the whole purpose of our podcast, is how difficult it is to embrace change. Now, change doesn't ordinarily come of its own, I feel like something's going amazingly well, I feel like blowing it up. Usually change comes out of a recognition of the need for change. Something has been burning your boats. It's usually that. So back to that question, right? Where and how have you got that time to do it? Or has it been out of pure necessity? Or has it been out of shiny object syndrome? Has it been out of pure burning ambition that you have endured all of that pain of constantly reinventing yourself?
The time. Well, I think there's really three questions on the table too, which is the time. It's also the coaching and the need for change. So I want to actually start with the different businesses first, which I think actually early on, it's been that I've been so willing to jump in the ready, fire, aim
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
and not necessarily fully recognizing what problem I'm getting myself into, and how many boats can you burn. But I think that in early on also, I would say, and it's taken me a long time, far longer than I would like to admit, to recognize what I'm good at, and not just like, oh, I can play guitar, or I can, get some people in a room for an event or whatever, but like, really, what am I good at and what do I enjoy doing? And not just doing it for the sake that I can do it, but because it's intentional. And so, and then who you're doing it with also. And I think early on, a lot of the need for that change came about because I wasn't putting myself into the best positions for me to perform at my best. And so at first, that time was simply like, hey, this sucker's on fire. I need to go work on it.
Yeah.
And I put my firefighter hat on. And I'd be lying if that doesn't still happen,
Yep.
but it happens less. And I make more now, a lot more. So the difference, I think, is how do you how do you actually spend more intentional time for something more important? And then how do I allocate the time, which, by the way, it's two things you can't buy: time and experience, right? You cannot buy them. It's
Yeah.
not possible yet. Maybe Neuralink, that might change it, at least the experience. But right now you can't.
Mm.
And so, I mean, we can read about it, but there's something totally different about being in the boat than it is watching the boat.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think the different businesses now, this is the difference. Now, I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how the hell to do a bunch of different things, but I never intersected them in a way that I have now. And now, when we have, say, for instance, on social media, we've spent a lot of time on it. But once I understand how to use social media, I can now use it for all the things, not just one thing. And guess what? I spent 20 years being a musician, and I spent all that time working on these same kind of problems. I just get to allocate the outcome in a different way, right? And then I build one business in a totally different way after screwing it up 3, 4, 5, 10 times. And now I can use that same lever to another business and say, hey, person over there, I just had this call today. Like, would you like me to help you be a multimillionaire? It's going to take longer than you like. It's going to be harder than you want it to be. But if you want to ride and you want to do this for real, then I will show you.
Yeah.
And so I think it's been a matter of saying, like, okay, well, what do you actually want it to look like? And now how do we actually line the things up for real this time? I feel like I got like my third or fourth shot of doing it right.
The interesting thing that you said, that where you have your firefighting hat, because I think that the two biggest challenges, I think every real estate investor says, I should have kept more, right? They look at the house they flipped in 2017 and they made like 15 grand, and now they would have just held on to it and cash loaded at $300 a month, and now it's worth 300K more, right? Could have just done that 3 more times a year and compounded that, right? But the other thing that really stuck out to what you just said is like, we're all guilty of just going in every day with our firefighter hat, our big hose, and just going to battle every day. And then the things that seemingly you tend to need to do, but it's more of like a want. And I'll be the first one to raise my hand and say I struggle with that a lot. And being a business owner, because ultimately I still feel like I'm more of a job owner, and sometimes a business owner. When you get people, because I know that you're coaching people all the time, and people are listening to this, and whether or not that they maybe own a business, or maybe they're in maybe like a commission only type position where they kind of control their schedule a little bit more than maybe someone that's on salary. Is there something that you've seen as a common theme that's like more of a mindset thing, Nathan, or do you think it's something that's more things that you have to do that are like tools, like active things to do? I'm just curious, as a host of the show, but also as a listener to what you're saying. It struck a chord right there. Just kind of speak to that a little bit, because I know that that's the number one challenge, I would think, and I know it's the number one challenge for me, is how do you discard of the firefighter hat and the big hose and really be able to start working on more importance of your time?
So I rolled off that plane yesterday, and this morning I literally write out a list of like what's the most important things, what moves the needle today. Literally is what the top of that thing says. And I think every single day well, on vacation I didn't do this, writing out gratitude and focus, but every single day other than on vacation, I start the day with literally writing 3 things of gratitude, 3 things of focus. And what I've realized is wherever the fire is, and I use that outside of burning the boats, but it's a great great tool, analogy, whatever in here. But wherever the fire is actually where we're putting something off. And I encourage people all the time, and I do this for myself. Like if it's sitting there burning, you need to go deal with it. And it might be the only thing, and it might be one huge giant problem, and there's actually 50 problems that get solved, and it might be just one little thing like, oh, I need to go have this conversation with the tenant that hasn't paid, but it's really occupying brain space.
Right.
And so, what I've learned is if I don't have intentional time of what I want the outcome to be, and then what are the things that need to be solved within that thing, then I never have the outcome that I want because I didn't make it clear enough. But if I make the outcome clear enough, then I might take longer than I want, or it might be more complicated, or it has that up and down, which we all know actually happens every time. But that's actually the occurrence. And so I think, for me, it starts literally with saying, what's the actual outcome? What, and not just this week, like this year, this quarter, next quarter, last quarter, or next quarter rather, this month, this week, today. And then we have that for every business. What does it do? Like, what is it going to do? And then the other thing, and you mentioned this about like being the business owner versus employee of the business. And I have both, right? I have both. And I definitely prefer one over the other.
I think we know which one that one is.
Yeah. What I've realized is every time you have that situation, there's a couple of things that are always missing. It's what is the actual commander's intent? It's a Jocko term from his book. Yeah. What's a commander's intent? And I made it clear enough, and then given enough autonomy and space to my team to actually go and do that. And they have the tools, they have the know-how, get it, want it, capacity to do it. So they have to have all those things. And then second was also I hadn't made clear enough what's in my brain outside of my brain. And so we didn't actually lay out like, this is what it looks like later, down the road. This is where we're going. And then third is there's a great book, Who Not How. And I remember reading it for the first time, like, oh, dang, thanks, Dan Sullivan, Benjamin Hardy. And recognizing, like, for instance, if you want to own a couple companies, like that's totally cool, but you can't run them all by yourself. So you need people in there to help do that and who understand it. Again, get it, want it, capacity to do it. And we're not out there hiring our bros or whomever that your bros are. Yeah. Whatever word you'd use. Yeah. We're hiring people who are incredible at that thing and that want to do that thing and that bring, something that you do not bring. And you need all the players of the band.
That's a great response. The building businesses. So for the listener, we've been talking about building businesses for the last 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about, not so much investing, but we're talking about how to build successful businesses. And so, Nathan, in this latest iteration, I'm going to give you an analogy that I use a little bit about myself over the years, where I've been pretty good at not chasing, rainbows in my life. And the analogy I use is like, there's like 2 dogs in a field, right? One dog has dug like 50 holes an inch deep, right? An inch deep. And then there's one dog and he's like 50 feet on the ground. You just see the dirt coming up behind him in his one hole. And I've been the dog in the hole, the big hole, all my life. And so there's a plus to that in that it's kept me focused, and it's kept me methodical. And I've basically been able to use templates and the people around me to create pretty high levels of income over the years. All right. And it's been pretty consistent by doing that. And by doing the same thing over and over and over again, we tend to iron out all the points of friction in the process, right? Now, whenever I jump into anything new, I realize that what I think I'm jumping into, it could be lending, it could be setting up a fund, it could be social media, it could be wholesaling, it could be whatever, right? It could be, manufacturing, trusses, it could be whatever. Every single like we are in an industry where there are literally as many opportunities in the real estate industry as there are stars in the sky. And so every day we meet other people who are crushing it in this or that or this or that. And so we have this tendency towards thinking what we do is shit and lame, and what, Jocko is doing is awesome, right?
Yeah.
And so as you look back, in certainly the upper end of the mid range of your career, and you look towards the next 10 years of your career, I'm really curious about what you've learned using that analogy and going forward. Because we've talked, we're going to get into the point of holding real estate, for longer at the end of this podcast, but like, let's keep it here focused about inside the businesses, because, the boats are being burned for us all the time. Interest rates have come in. Like you are a very, very established turnkey provider in Kansas City. And you are also building, I think it was 200, 300, 400 plus new home construction down in Texas. And then interest rates comes in and, puts a fire hose on your business. And that's not to mention all the other stressors inside of those actual businesses of doing all of that at the same time. And then you're like, okay, well, I'm going to have to pivot because investors are not, there's still people buying real estate, but they tend not to be your turnkey investor, your out of state turnkey investor. Like there's not a huge amount of people signing up for losing $400 a month. So, so these pivots they're not a reflection of your, of your personality type. These pivots are often brought upon us just through the boats being burned, right? The macro or micro economic environment. So as you look back at what you've learned, jumping into, from this seat into that seat into the other seat, I think what I've picked up over the years is that what problem am I trying to solve here? And am I actually solving the real problem? I'll give you an example. You get into a great podcast by Alex Hermosi yesterday. He was talking about, well, what business are you actually in? Because if you get into the lawn care business, let's say you want to buy a big lawn care business, you're actually getting into the recruitment business, because you need to recruit, and then the cultural business of recruiting and culturally maintaining that business, right? And then, if you get into a consultancy business, you're getting into the high-end recruitment business. If you get into the gym business, you're getting into the brand and marketing business. The machines and the maintenance, that's irrelevant. It's the branding and the marketing so as we jump into these businesses and we're forced to pivot, it's really important to understand what business that we're actually getting into. And when I look at your industry experience inside your businesses, and we're going to get into your influential network in a moment, but as I look at these businesses that you've been to, they're all quite symbiotic because they're all within real estate. But as you go forward in the next 10, let's say the next 10 years, what do you want to take into the next 10 years in your business world, not your investor world, We're going to talk about that later. But in your business world, what would you like the next 10 years to look like given what you've learned in the last 15?
Well, I'll use the construction and development as the example. So we first started buying real estate because we wanted to, own rentals, which then developed into people asking us to do it for them, which developed into a turnkey company, which then blew up. And we had this, huge company and doing, 100 plus, renovations a year, which had
Yep.
huge overhead. And we scaled with people first rather than process first. And we scaled, so we were doing millions and millions and millions, tens of millions a year, but it scaled beyond our abilities as leaders and also our visions and what we created or what we wanted to create. And so the machine was really running us instead of us letting
Right.
the machine run. And uh, in the structure of it too, like who's doing what and how did we. And so as I wrote, I always take notes during these things. So because I like to remember what we're talking about. So I wrote down, looking back, we didn't. Some people say don't do partnerships and it doesn't work for people. But what we realized was all of a sudden we're making 10x, 15x with a much smaller operation, utilizing things that we're much better at doing. But we had to learn it the hard way like 5 times first. And so, in letting it unfold, I remember this, I think he's from South Carolina. His name's Darren. He said, let it unfold, baby, let it unfold.
Yeah.
And I don't like doing that. I'm impatient. I don't want to let it unfold. I want it to be freaking here now.
Yeah.
And so going forward, it's keeping things smaller and tighter and having less people with more responsibility and autonomy than having bajillion people. And also I utilize a lot of VAs in my companies now who just vastly outperform people that I had who are US based that were 4x or 6x or 10x the cost. And then second was going forward in the business too was really putting literally the only focus is producing revenue. Everything else beyond revenue is what you get to do with it. But if you aren't actually focused on consistently producing revenue and having a machine that spits out cash, then nothing else matters. And the holding doesn't matter. None of it matters. And because we went through several seasons of buying a bunch of rentals and then selling a bunch of rentals and buying a bunch of rentals and selling a bunch of rentals. And so now I'm like, nope, cash machine. I call it the cash machine. You better have in a couple of them. You get the cash machine.
Yeah.
And then now you have a lot of options. And your problem is now, what do I do about the taxes and my wealth generation and growth? And now you get to solve a different problem.
Hallelujah. What a great answer.
Nathan, you mentioned a hot button topic that I think a lot of listeners, you hear a lot, hey, I want to, grow this company. What's the first thing you do? Oh, just get a bunch of VAs, right? And like, I feel like a lot of the things that you just said, which ultimately seem very simple, I could feel the blood, sweat, and tears, the scars, the bleeding head of like the lessons learned to be able to get to those fairly simple yet very powerful, kind of terms. On the VAs, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I know that it's something I read all the time. I'm going to start a company and I'm just going to like get a bunch of VAs, right? And they're just going to like magically be better and cheaper. But you mentioned you had both sides. You had local American workers that you're paying. There's more strings attached. There's insurance and there's taxes and a bunch of things. Whereas you can just potentially pay like a VA provider just one check every week or whatever it is. But you said that you had more success with them. Obviously, being able to just like hire someone on and be like, good luck, here, I'm sure you'll figure it out. That's how most people fail. But the mentality of a VA, can you talk a little bit about the mindset of why you think a VA is more successful in your business and you had to fire some of your American workers I'm more interested in the mentality of why you think that was the result of that.
Well, if anyone's tried to hire somebody recently, you can go get $25 an hour at Target, so
Right.
to you try to hire an entry level person into a real estate company and they think they should make six figures. And you're like, well, I've gone months where I didn't pay myself so I could pay you, your salary. So maybe not. Um, and I've had, 3, 4, 5 iterations of the whole VA thing too. I've hired people myself. I've trained them myself. And lately I've been hiring through a specific company, right? And they actually train individual people for individual jobs. And that's one of those things where I think a lot of people are impatient, and there are ways you can move the needle forward faster, which is you can hire a coach, you can hire somebody who's already trained, whatever. But I think at the end of the day, well, first of all, American person, like in our wholesale company, for instance, they want 10 or 20% or whatever in acquisitions. They want a huge chunk.
Mhm.
And we spend what one employee costs us for four amazing people.
Yeah.
And second of all, and I tell them all the time, and I don't even call them VAs, to just say it's our team, it's our real estate team.
Yeah.
And I tell them all the time, both directly and as a group, you guys are crushing it. And they are grateful for a job. They're grateful for opportunity. They're grateful for a team who actually gives a shit. They're grateful for a leader who shows up for them and holds them accountable and praises them for working and doing a good job. And so I'm not going to lie. I mean, I literally am shocked at how well it works when you
Wow.
have the right people. And so, we just hired another VA. We'll have a total of 5, 6, 7, 8. We'll have 8 full-time VAs in our couple of companies, and we have probably another 2 or 3 spaces for people right now. And so just you know, uh, people don't call out sick. They don't not show up. They have all worked, and I know it sounds such like a broad. I hate broad statements like that, but at this point, if you have a system in place where people are trained, they actually care, they actually know what they're doing, and you actually do your job as a leader, it's been phenomenal for me.
Yeah. And the one tip to the listeners here is you have to understand it first. You have to know
Yeah.
exactly what you have to visualize, like your job. You've heard the term, build a team and let the team build a business, right? But the leader has to build a team, and the leader has to understand the processes and the tasks that generate revenue, right? And that's it. That's what I love about VAs as well, is like
Mm-hmm.
you just have to visualize and document the tasks that generate revenue. No meetings, there's no nonsense. Then you just need to record that, train them on your recordings, make sure that they understand it and they're away. And all you got to do then is fill in the fill in the blanks, the connective tissue between those things, right? There's
The
certain
other,
businesses that are much more process and systems orientated towards the use of VAs. The full life cycle of buying and renovating, selling, closing, doing inspection items on a flip, let's say. The full life cycle of that is so multidimensional. There may be, honestly, there could be, I would think that there's somewhere around 5,000 pieces of knowledge that you need to know between A and Z that I've just outlined there. But then there's business models that are so much easier. There might be there literally might be 20 pieces of knowledge, And I think as I go forward in my life, like stepping a little bit further away from complex processes that, they might produce, some, obviously you're fixing complex issues. But there are businesses out there that are much more amenable to the use of VAs than others. So what do you take from that as you go forward in the next 10 years?
Well, I love that question too. And honestly, we used to do lots and lots and lots of fix and flips, and I've virtually stopped doing them. And, when I look at whether it's a cash conversion cycle or the simplicity of a wholesale transaction versus a retail, flip transaction, or the, gosh, when you tack on, from acquiring a property to renovating a property to listing a property and selling a property, and inspections and all these things, like you said, there's probably thousands of things in there. And so I also look at just time, so what is my time? What's my commitment in this transaction? And so, like you said, what's the beautiful thing about this and utilizing a VA is, for instance, when we get someone, their sole job when they come into the company is, for instance, like a cold caller, and they've been trained on cold calling, and there's a system in cold calling.
Mm-hmm.
And day one, they enter the business and they already know what they're doing. But it doesn't mean that I'm not responsible to be a leader. So we still hold a weekly team meeting. It just happens that they're, 9 hours ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And I still welcome them every morning and evening on WhatsApp, right? Just like I would, or just like Kia, our COO, because I want them to feel like people.
Yeah.
And it's easy to let something like that go for 2 or 3, and it doesn't mean that it has to be me. I just like them to know, hey, I'm here, or we care. You're doing a great job. But each one of those positions, they're literally bolt on, plug and play into the company, because the VA company built it that way.
Yeah.
And so, you can literally say, oh, you want to scale your business? Great. We'll go double down on the number of people you have in your organization. And you can actually do that. And you're not trying to solve every single one of those pieces. You're saying, guess what? We're going to plug you in, and then we're going to, double down on our data, or double down on our leads, and be able to produce a double the result with not having to do double the work.
I love it. I think so. Nathan, I want to switch gears a little bit, because I know that you've done turnkey. We've done turnkey. So I always like to sometimes be able to have chats online and offline. And, I know that you've sold hundreds, if not thousands of turnkeys, and you have these chats. You sell maybe someone their first turnkey rental. And when we say turnkey, it's kind of like a full package for everyone that may not know exactly what a turnkey is. Most of the time, they don't live in the town that they're buying it in. Maybe they live in a place where it's just too expensive. In California, they live in Seattle, they live in Denver, where, $200,000 doesn't buy you much, right? And so it's like, how do I get started in a market where I actually have $50,000 to put down? Go to a person like you in a company where you're like, hey, I'm going to renovate it right. It's going to be in the nice neighborhood. It's going to be managed, everything, right? So that's what kind of turnkey is. And you have these conversations with these investors, and maybe they buy a property from you, maybe they buy 2, but they don't usually buy 10, or they don't usually buy 20 from you. I'm just curious, because I have challenges too, as to like being able to really build that trajectory. Because if I buy 2 rentals from you, Nathan, my life honestly is not going to change one bit, right? Yeah, it'll grow, and maybe you get a little bit of experience, but ultimately most people buy real estate passively to grow their wealth, because you hear the same things, right? I want to replace my income. I want to sit on the beach. I want, that's kind of what they think, right? And then we get to the point where we can sit on the beach, and then your thing, right? What have you seen in your discussions with these folks? There's a lot of people listening that are probably in that bucket right now of like, should I burn my boats? Should I invest? High interest rates, this, that. There's so many reasons not to take action. What have you seen in your discussions that have been the challenge? Is it time? Is it money? Is it just mindset? What have you seen? Because we have our opinions that we've talked about many times, David and I. What are you seeing on your side?
I've had so many of those conversations.
I know you have. That's why it was a very
Yeah,
targeted question to you specifically.
yeah, and it's the same conversation. And I'm sure both of you guys have had it many times too. It's just the same conversation. I want to get my spouse home from work. I want to quit my shitty 9 to 5 job. I hate my boss. I have no retirement, or very little. I don't have any cash flow. I don't have, and I think that the truth is that investing in two is better than zero. But I think a lot of times people don't understand really what happens. And, you know, really what happens is you're not going to make that much off of an individual rental. Like you said, it's not going to move the needle. And people get frustrated because it comes back to that whole let it unfold. In that same house, if you would have bought one every 3 or 4 or 5 years and you did that 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8 times, and you actually did that and you actually paid them down and you actually waited, you are a millionaire, multimillionaire. Like it's
Yep.
it's 100%. Like there's no question. And we
Yep.
have 3 guys on the screen who've done that and are all multimillionaires because of it. And but it's really hard to do that. And when you write the $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 check for some issue, and you want to go blame the turnkey provider or whatever, how many times have we had that conversation where you're like, well, dude, that was 3 years ago. I have nothing to do with that problem. But so I think a lot of times when people think turnkey, they think no problems and they think easy solution. And so there's nothing passive other than, Dave and I've talked about this, like you're lending money and you're getting a check. That's pretty passive unless you have to go get a property back. But, and I'm not sure if I've deviated off your question, but I've had this conversation over and over and over and over. And it comes back to what I talked about earlier, which is everyone needs their cash machine, and it might be a W-2 job, and that's okay. And I have a bunch of people in my mastermind who, have companies where they were literally the technician. And I'm pulling this out of eMyth. I'm pretty sure that, technician, manager, and the entrepreneur. And they moved from technician to manager to entrepreneur or somewhere in the middle. And it's okay. We still need people to freaking dig ditches and build schools and, repair stuff. And there's no shame in that. And there's a resurgence in those jobs, by the way, because people are tired of paying outpaced inflation for schools that, they're getting out of school with $200,000 of debt, which they could have gone and bought some freaking real estate with, by the way, and, or lived some life and learned some lessons. But anyway, I think that you don't earn the right to buy real estate without something that's already creating cash flow.
That's right.
It just doesn't exist. And I look at it now, and to be honest with you, I don't even look when I'm buying real estate now. I really don't spend a lot of time on cap rates or returns. I look at my leverage, my cash in, and what my long-term outlook looks like on that property. And because I'm using it as a tool against my current income.
Such a great answer. So we are, if you know what much about my history in my teachings, Nathan, you'll know that the point you just made, it works. It 100% works. And the algorithm that works is debt by time by scale equals wealth. If you know how to use debt, you have time on your hands and you do it in enough scale, boom. But there's a part that's missing from that algorithm, and it's probably grit multiplied by debt by time by scale. You need the grit. You need the deferred gratification to make those decisions, to take that 50 grand or 30 grand and put it to the side. And then you also need to be able to survive those psychological bullets of having a roof get shot, or your insurance dropping you, or your air conditioner going out on Friday night at 7:30 exactly, because that's when air conditioners blow up.
Always.
And it's always Friday nights. We have a long-standing joke in this podcast about Friday nights. I like Friday night comes around, I'm like, oh, here it goes. Here it is. It's Friday night. But that's really, really wise. And it's lovely to hear from, somebody else. And it's a great question, Clark, as to why do so many people just kind of jump off too early before they've created enough scale? And what it is that there is no such thing. And this whole podcast has been about, there is no such thing as a free lunch. If you want anything at all, there's work involved, right? Nathan, I'm going away next week for the summer. My kids are off school, and I rent out my house when I'm going away, and almost everyone around me is like, "You're bonkers." And I'm just a cash flow junkie. I can't help that. That's just what I do. It's what I am. And but there's so many. There is work involved. I do it every year. But just to put it in context, I'll land somewhere around $28,000 for going away for 7 weeks. I booked in like just under 25,000 already, and I'll have another 3,000. That doesn't sound like it sounds like a huge amount of money to some people, not a lot to others. But guess what else I've done? There's no deferred maintenance in my house now because I'm doing it. There's no clutter in my house. I've got 3 young kids, right? You go to my house, looks like a hotel, right? Now, the reason why it looks like that is because we do this every year, and every year it gets easier, right? But my friends are telling me that I'm nuts. I've quite recently just been in 3 family houses in the last weekend, and we were just like, "You're crazy," or "We couldn't possibly do that." I'm like, "Yeah, from zero, that's going to be a real hard thing to do, right?" But I'm going to be in Europe for 2 months this year, and it's not going to cost me a dime, not a dime. Yeah, I'm in France, Spain, England, staying in a beautiful hotel in London for a week towards the end of it. But it's the effort. And the point is that anything worthwhile in life takes work. That's just just takes work.
So I train martial arts, and one of the things I talk with my coach about, and I use this now in business, which is, I call it the uncomfortable bucket. In in martial arts or in jujitsu, and there's the Mike Tyson quote, of course,
Everybody's got a plan, right?
Well, I really have been punched in the face. I've really been, in situations where you have someone's arm around your neck and you're trying to get out. And I think that, you mentioned grit, and, or sometimes I coach people on this where you're bailing on yourself, but people only know the level of difficulty that they've experienced. And so I think oftentimes too, people are afraid to put themselves in these situations because they're afraid, right? They're afraid. They bail on themselves. They have a poor self-esteem. They haven't practiced. And so just like anything, whether it was playing a guitar or swinging a golf club or doing jujitsu, you have to actually get on the mat. And it's like the Teddy Roosevelt quote, which talks about to the man in the arena who might be covered in blood, sweat, who loses but valiantly, unlike the poor souls who never put themselves in the game. And so, don't be that person. You have to go practice.
So powerful.
Yeah.
It's like I'm just going to let that sink in there for a minute, because that's exactly it. Everything is scary, right? Mm-hmm. Everything is
until
scary
it's not.
And until it's not. But even then, it's still, do you have it all figured out? Did Clark have it all? I don't.
No.
But I'll tell you what, I get up every day, and I look forward to making kind of longer term decisions. I think everything's scary in the short term,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you're going to get into the ring and you're going to get punched in the face right now, real estate can be a little bit like that. The moment you get in it, something can happen, but it can kick you in the stones pretty quickly. But that's actually a really cool segue, because the next thing I was just about to say, which was you need to surround yourself with some cool people, right? Now, you have built and maintained one of the strongest networks in this business, right? And I say that as a credit to you. Within the entire real estate industry, the biggest players deeply, and you know them on a very personal level. I know the people you know them better than I do, right? And I'm thinking the biggest names, out there that we all know and admire in the real estate business. Nathan is personal friends with all of them. And I want to know what you think about, now, I want to put a caveat in here. Just because somebody's well known Okay, it could mean that they're just really good at social media and they're really good at marketing and they're really good at getting their name out there. But then, you pull the kimono back and maybe some of their businesses aren't so pretty underneath that pile. But for the most part, people who rise to the top are, and they do. And all of the leaders that have made a name for themselves in this business. What do you think they have in common? What are the common traits, Nathan, outside of their ability to get up every day and make content and get themselves out there? What are the common traits they possess? And overall, what should a listener take away from their particular mindset and their approach to getting things done? What do you think that the really successful people that you pal around with have in common?
Man, that's a great question. First of all, I'm sure there's people I don't know, but I'm a networker for sure. In relationship, I actually kind of hate the word networking, by the way. I really like building relationships because it actually takes work. Networking is like when you have 2 cocktails in and you're trying to share your wares, but nobody wants to buy. They all want to sell. So I think that there's a common denominator in the soul of people who are driven and the desire of something awesome and some purpose beyond themselves. And I don't know really any super successful people who are selfish. I'm sure they're out there. I just don't hang out with them. And I don't like them. They're not my people. And so the people that I know that are incredible, that the most successful are the ones that care beyond money. Money is a tool. They are great parents. They're great people. They are willing to be wrong. People who are constantly fighting you on what's right, or that is only talking about themselves. Those are not the people you want to be around because they're not listening. The best winners are incredible listeners. They're incredible problem solvers. They're incredible loving people who bring their whole self to problems and relationships and opportunities. And so, if you're looking for an incredible relationship, those are the things. And guess what? Where it starts to back to the uncomfortable bucket, getting better, loving yourself, being actually humble and kind and a listener yourself. And it starts with that and how you can serve other people. And those people who serve the most, what's the Jim Rohn, right? You help enough people get what they want, you'll get what you want.
It reminds me of, I've read The Go-Giver now 2 or 3 times, and it means different things at different times for me. And, I constantly, and David and I talk about this all the time, everyone needs to get out How to Win Friends and Influence People, because it's, Dale Carnegie, whenever that was written in the 50s or whenever it was, because it makes all those old references that I didn't understand half of them. But the general, the thesis is just being able to ask, what is it that I can do for you? And when you said, and I can put myself in every single real estate conference across the country where everyone is selling something and no one's buying anything. It's like, what can you do for me? Here's what I have to offer. Would you like to buy it? Not, there's nothing about, hey, tell me about what you're looking for. Maybe I'm a fit, maybe I'm not. But, that scenario you just built, I put myself in every single real estate conference where it's like, listen, I don't give a shit about you, but I've got something I need to peddle and you should probably buy it, right? So let's go ahead and here's the agreement, whatever that looks like. And, I think it's a huge mindset shift to be able to just stop caring about yourself for a second, stop being selfish, and really being able to put out there to the universe, how is it that I can help you, and just keep giving value. And then, you read The Go-Giver and it just comes back to you tenfold, right? But it requires you to stop being so damn selfish. And, I think it's human nature to be selfish, right? And so you have to be able to, think outside the box and think bigger than that. And, I think reading those types of books that I just mentioned, they've left a lasting impression on me for sure. And I think that it changed the whole trajectory of the conversation when you're like, hold on, I don't have anything to sell you. like I see it, you've got a challenge over there. You just tell me about it, and just go in knowing that maybe I can change that person's life, or maybe I can save them from making a big mistake, and that's going to come back tenfold. But if you just keep adding that and providing value, and I know, Nathan, that you do that all the time. I know that you do, and in DNA. I'm sure that you think that that's probably one of the biggest reasons why you're so successful right now.
It makes a huge difference, man. And and when people, how many times my coach calls it an ear beating. How many times have you been in a conversation when you just take an ear beating? Somebody, it's like their college football, life, or on and on ad nauseum about themselves, and just like, and you know what? The fact is, a good buddy of mine, Matt Larson, who's like the epitome of this, by the way. He, he talks about like people. There's so many people that just want to be loved. They're just so lacking love, probably of themselves and outside, and but also I really I keep coming back to this every single time, which is, what if you look somebody in the eye and you're like, yeah, tell me more about that. Like, that sounds like a difficult situation, and having empathy and for people and sympathy for what they're dealing with, and also the recognition, like, hey, you don't have to take that on. This is not your problem, but you can bring your whole self to the problem, right? And I think it makes all the difference in being authentic and showing up and
I'd like to add to that, just in terms of the successful people I've met and the less so. I think the big differentiator is the less successful people have a scarcity mindset in how they go about their life. They have to fight for every penny. They have to win. They have this, strong component of scarcity about them. And I think the very successful people have an abundance mindset. And to give you a, it's easy to say those words, but to give you a physical representation of that, you as a turnkey provider, me as a turnkey provider over the years, have been, if something goes wrong, somebody buys a property from us and it's like a $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 thing that happens like a year later, you've got two choices right there. You can say, well, I bought it off a year ago. You need to grow some big boy pants and head off and fix it yourself. Or you can say, you know what? I do want to maintain a relationship with you. Let me go back to the vendor and see what he can do. I'll toss in a bit of money. You're getting a new thing, so you toss in a bit. We can create a win-win for everybody. And so that, those two scenarios right there is a scarcity is like, no, you're on your own, and abundance. Well, guess what? The person whose problem I've just fixed is going to tell, 25 of his relatives and everyone else, and he's going to buy from me again. And so I think that abundance mentality has served me well over the years. And that's what I think that these leaders in our business, for people's cynicism about real estate and snake oil salesmen and, this cynical nonsense that you see on social media about, burn them down or do that. It's people don't realize how the people who rise to the top of our industry, they have done so usually because they're amazing people, and they are really, really like they don't rise there because they are scared. They have a scarcity mentality and they are, out there grabbing everything off the table. They rise to the top because of the opposite of that. And so we've only have a few minutes left, Nathan, right? And I want to leave people with, on top of all the gold that we've been dropping here and that you've been dropping here, I should say, where do you think the water is flowing and this new high interest rate environment? I think the interest rates are going to stay high-ish. They're never going to go back to what we know. And there's going to be a lot of fallout from that if, we maintain a somewhat position for the next 3, 4, 5 years. And so nobody knows. I'm not asking you where do you think interest rates are going. You're not smart enough, and neither am I. But where do you think the water is flowing over the next few years? We're believe it or not, we're nearly 3 years into this high interest rate environment. Nearly 3 years. This interest rate environment kicked off 3 years ago, and so we're 3 years in. That's let's say half the cycle. But we've got a fair bit in front of us, in my opinion, as well. So where do you think the water is flowing for you? For your businesses going forward? What do you think you want to lean into? What do you think you want to lean out of? And where do you think the water is flowing for the next 3 years or so, as you map out your 3-year plan?
There's a podcast right there. Um,
You're not kidding.
well, I think there's so many ways you can go after that, globally, and things that are happening in the world, which are, you know, people should be paying attention to the global things that are happening.
Yep.
I think from a national perspective too, and politics, and how, people are fighting about the dumbest things, and when in reality we all want such similar things. It's wild how divisive over dumb things that we can be, without looking at the things that are most important.
Yeah.
And to me, which is, can my kids go to school and put food on the table and go on vacation and enjoy what I do? And, you look at the quality of life for Americans, and people continue to be less happy. And so it's insane to me. So next 3 years, I'm looking at, what do I spend my time on? The opportunities in partnerships and relationships, and how can we, like you said, go deeper on those things instead of wider. I'm not trying to add a bunch more businesses. I'm trying to get them to run and function without me, and or the percentage of me that's required, and not sitting in seats in the business, but sitting in seats in ownership of a business, and working with people that I love. And I'm looking at how do I get to make 2, 3, 400,000 a month, 500,000 a month. That's my 3 year. Like, what are the steps in place where now we're making a month what, some of the highest earners make in a year, and how do we then translate that into wealth preservation and philanthropy and fun? And how do I spend all my time on those things, doing something that I love, hanging out with the people I love, doing fun things that are really interesting. And when I'm not doing that, my time is not reserved to things that I don't. So specifically, I would say, I'm looking at the cash machine within my wholesale. I'm looking at that within our lending company, and I'm thinking about how do we have it in a consistent way that just spits out cash, and that I take care of those people around me who have helped create that, and then we are taking and buying real estate. And if people, honestly, when I think about, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine whose grandpa was in real estate. Grandpa just bought a $70,000 truck. And he asked his grandpa, well, when you bought your first Dodge truck, what did you spend? And he's like, 7,000 to 70,000, right? Over what span of time? 30, 40, 50 years, whatever, right? That same house down the street, 100 years ago was 50,000. It's now $1 million, 100,000, whatever. So guess what? 30, 40, 50 years from now, that same house is going to be 10 million or 5 million, and the same truck's not going to be 70,000. It's going to be 150,000, 200,000, 250,000. And so what people don't realize is everyone is in the game. Some people are just not playing the game. And so I want to be better at playing the game. And I also want to be more, I want to be spending the time more dialed in on less time, but more focused time on my work and on, business, personal, and family. And so cash machine, buy real estate, less debt, a lot more fun.
Nathan, you mentioned happy, right? And it's funny how, as I've gotten older, I'm 40, and it's like I want to do more things that put a smile on my face, who I like working with, right? And David and I talk about this a lot. What are things that we can do to be successful at that don't create a tremendous amount of stress, right? Because you've seen statistics that, like, the United States, we have all these amenities and we have these things, and we're like the 86th happiest country in the world, right? And it blows my mind, is that, like, what is it all for if you're not happy, right? So how can we create things where I like working with people that I enjoy spending time with, right? So how can I do that, be happy, have lower stress things? So that strikes home with me. We will get out, Nathan, on this last question, and this has been absolute gold today. And for our listeners, right? You're obviously an avid reader. And it sounds, I know you probably got a podcast or an Audible or something on probably, in the background at all times of your day. Give the listeners one book that's not real estate related that has made the biggest change in your mindset in, maybe at a point where you're burning your boats and it really helped you to pivot to the next one. Give the listeners one non-real estate book that they need to go out right now and get on Audible and buy right now.
Well, first of all, I am a book nerd. I love books, and I usually read about a book a week, and consistently doing that. So to pick one is a little difficult, but so I'm
I
gonna
understand.
cheat since I can cheat.
Three
And I'm gonna
more
give you-
wishes, huh?
yeah. So I'm reading this book right now, which is just a mind blower, and it's kind of listening to like the grandpa. It's like the best grandpa who's like the most entrepreneurial stud, but also had the best marriage ever and built giant businesses. His name's Brian Tracy, and it's called Maximum Achievement and Strategies and Skills That Will Unlock Your Hidden Powers to Succeed. I have loved this book, and just it's literally like hanging out with the coolest grandpa ever, who happens to have the most wisdom ever. And so it's just been brilliant, whether it's from business or personal or marriage and all the things. And so I'm looking at it right now. He's talking about parenting and loving on your kids, and so I think it's a brilliant book and beautiful book. I'd also say one of the first ones that come to mind is Tony Robbins' Unlimited Power. It's the first time I ever heard about NLP and some strategies you can use to for state change. And I think a lot of times people suffer in their own thoughts. And guess what? I wrote a post about this the other day. Feelings are feelings. They're changeable. They are not real. They're real in that moment, but we can change them. And well, I shouldn't say they're not real. They feel real, right? But feelings, they can be changed, and our feelings are simply. You can say, all right, well, burning the boats, that might be its own feeling, right? But then you get yourself in a positive state to go affect change. So anyway, that book is amazing. And then the third one I'll say, and well, actually, they're both. So Jocko Willink's both Extreme Ownership and Dichotomy of Leaderships are both just phenomenal books.
Right.
And also, if you need an ass kicking and a state change, you can go to those books.
Yeah.
And finally, I'd say Chris Voss's Never Split the Difference. If you're like in a practical state,
Bible.
It's just an unbelievable book. I See 4 Hour Work Week behind you. Amazing book. Richest Man in Babylon. I could go on and on and on. But depending on where you are, or from a sales perspective, learning perspective, communication, networking, connection, like Never Split the Difference, dude. My absolutely life-changing book if you listen to them.
I read it for fun. Like I read it. I want to get better at sales and being able to understand and have empathy and matching and mirroring. But I would read that just like I would watch the latest movie on Netflix. So I totally get you.
It's that good. It's that good. I mean, I've read it probably 4 or 5 times. I've read the Jocko books 4 or 5 times, and they're like a yearly reader.
Well, I'd like to add one more to your list, and it's the No Quitter's Guide to Crushing It in Real Estate by Nathan Brooks.
Man,
seriously, that's you've written a book based on a lot of experience, and for $25 you can go out and get 15 years of experience of out there learning what to do, what not to do. Is it a No Quitter's Guide, Crushing It in Real Estate by Nathan Brooks? And with that, Nathan, very unfortunately, we've got to end the conversation and we got to let people go. Nathan, thank you so much for joining us today at somewhat short not short notice, but you flew in from Italy at 10 o'clock last night or whatever it was. So thanks for getting up and making the time to spend some time with us and our guests. Nathan, how can people find you, and how can people interact with you and learn more from you?
Absolutely. And thank you again for having me on, and loved it every minute. I love these conversations. It's my favorite thing. And only thing better would be us in the same place, drinking that great glass of wine, eating that great sushi meal.
Nathan, the best.
baby, I'm in. I'm easy to find. I've made a commitment on social, and I also made it really simple. So Nathan Brooks, REI, it's all of them. So whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, I'm the most active on Facebook and Instagram, and so you can connect with me there. Shoot us direct message, like and follow, and we'd love to help. We have a mission to help 1,000 people become millionaires, and so love a handful of the people, or maybe even more than a handful, listening to this right now, who become one of those. So
Yeah. It's funny you say that. I have this running theory, Nathan, that give me a 25-year-old that's ambitious, that has a decent income, and I 100% guarantee I can make him a millionaire in 20 years.
easy,
Guaranteed.
probably
Like,
faster.
probably
Yeah.
faster. Yeah, I'm being conservative. I'm trying
Yeah.
not to sound too whiz bang there. But you can, 100. Give me a 25-year-old that has a decent income, and I'll make him a millionaire, or her
Yeah.
a millionaire. But they have to have the right approach. And with all that, Nathan, thank you. We'll wrap up. Clark, any last words?
It's been great, Nathan. I've enjoyed this just as much as a listener as I have a co-host to this. So I've been taking notes in my head. So it's been great. You're a great guy, a great person to follow. I love watching your stuff on social media. From the span of A to Z, whether it's real estate or mindset or just what the hell's going on in the economy. So that's always an interesting thing. So with that, Nathan, we wish you the best. We look forward to staying in touch, and we'll see you next time.
Likewise. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Nathan. Well, Clark. That was a powerful interview. What was your thoughts on that?
The interesting thing is that I have a lot of respect for Nathan. I know you've known Nathan a lot longer than I have, but I've known him now for a couple of years, and I just respect the type of person that he is, his character, and I think that's shown through in this interview. And he's been in real estate for a long time. Like he's been, we're similar in age, and he's been doing it for a long time. And you could feel through his answers, through his kind of like nonverbal communications, how much of the wisdom that he brings to the table. And it's all through experiences. Like I don't see that he was speaking because he learned something on YouTube yesterday or he listened to some podcast yesterday. Like those are real life experiences where he's skinned his knee, he's made mistakes, he's adjusted, he's pivoted, and then he's become as successful as today. So great interview, David. I'm very proud of that. I learned a lot myself just as a listener. What about you, David? What were your takeaways?
Look, the analogy really is how his life reflects all of our lives, in that nothing goes exactly according to plan.
Very rarely does.
If you want a super non-emotional, non-eventful, small life where not much happens, that's completely fine. I know people, and that is essentially what they're trying to achieve,
Right.
But if you want a bigger life, and if you want to have experiences, and you want to have friends in high places, and in multiple different disciplines, and you want to have traveled, and you want to have experience of running businesses, growing wealth, what to do when you actually achieve some level of wealth. If you want that from your life, it's going to be hard. And you
Yeah.
can hear directly, as you say, verbally and non-verbally, you can hear the scar tissue in what Nathan has to say. And yet he continues on. He continues battling and finding his way to where the water has the least amount of friction, and where his life inevitably will lead to a very, very successful end. And so my takeaway was, if you want something in life, it's going to be hard, and there's going to be a lot of lessons along the way, but you got to keep on getting up, brushing yourself off, because one thing's for sure, I've been in construction and real estate my entire career, right? And that spans 30 years. Okay. And one thing I know for sure is that the macro and micro environment is constantly changing. The landscape on which I am working, you know, the economy is booming. It's great. The economy's contracting. It's terrible. Um, Buyers are abundant. You know, buyers are scarce. Sellers are abundant. Sellers are scarce. Capital is abundant. Capital is scarce. Interest rates are low. Interest rates are high. All of these ingredients are always in the mix of life. And in the career that we have chosen, which is real estate, there's two sides to it that we've talked about a lot. There's like the making money side of it, which is essentially your job, can be equated to your job. And then there is the wealth generation side of it, which just gives you a little bit more understanding of real estate. If you're in the trenches all day, makes it easier to hold real estate.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that, the income side is whatever we do for income is fair game. If you are a W-2 worker and you're crushing it, and you are a small business owner or a medium-sized business owner and you're crushing it, or you're in real estate and you're struggling or you're doing well or whatever it might be, that's all the income side of it. But Nathan has only one single regret. And that regret is a regret that we've talked about numerous times, which was, I wish I kept more.
Always.
And if we can dig deeper into I wish I kept more, that is, I wished I had let debt by time, by scale, do its thing. I wish I had just instead of taking that rip, that $40,000 rip, that $15,000 rip, where I sold it and I ended up paying taxes on it. I'd have a big team. If I just held more of them, I'd be a multi-millionaire today. And when I talk about, I'm talking big millions, 80 million, 90 million, 100 million. And so that is a common refrain I hear from every single person who has any kind of experience in real estate is, I wish I kept more. And so my big takeaway is, if you can learn from that, the listener, know that earning is just phase one. What to do, it does not give you, just because you're good at making money does not mean that you know what to do with money when you've made it, because that's a secondary challenge. You're going to have to work with a financial manager, you're going to have to work with your own emotions, or you're going to have to work in real estate, but you're going to have to put your money to productive use. And so it's amazing how people are really good at making money. And we spent a lot of time talking about how Nathan has made money over the years, but what you do with that money is hold. That's the hold part that he was referring to. My big takeaway, Clark, is we don't use our time efficiently. We're all busy making money so we can eat hamburgers today, but we're not taking the long-term view enough. And that's what Burn the Boats podcast is about, is exactly that regret.
Yep. I love it. So if you like what you're hearing, everybody, we're trying to grow this podcast. We want to keep bringing you very, very high level content, bring on really, really cool guests that have done some really great things so they're able to share their experiences. Go hit the subscribe button. Go leave us a 5-star review and actually leave a comment. We really appreciate that because it helps other people to see it. There's a gazillion podcasts out there. There's a million ways to divert your time in any way you want. So we appreciate you taking the time to listen. If you would just go hit the subscribe button and leave us a review, it means the world to us. And also too, if you're listening to all this, you like it, but you haven't taken action, we have a free online mastermind that David and I have created on Skool, SKOOL. It's called The Race to the First 5 Rentals. And we feel very highly that we want to get you over that hump of buying the first 2, 3, 4 rentals to really start creating meaningful momentum in your life and your financial journey. So with that, David, we appreciate it. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you next time.
You've been listening to the Burn Your Boats podcast with Clark Lunt and David Shaw. We would love to hear from you. Please reach out at burnyourboatswealth.com with comments, questions, and if you have a topic you would like Clark and David to discuss on an upcoming episode. We would very much appreciate it if you took the time to rate and review Burn Your Boats podcast on your favorite podcast listening app, and make sure to follow and share on social media. Content in Burn Your Boats podcast is for entertainment purposes only and is not legal or financial advice. Please review our legal disclaimer at burnyourboatswealth.com. Thank you for listening.